From the largest and most mysterious primates that ever walked the earth to the buried remains of ancient giants in the middle of California, find out if giants really did exist. The Gigantopithecus. There are a lot of clues that say giants could have existed on Earth many years ago. Take the Gigantopithecus, for example. This was the largest primate that ever walked around on our planet, but it actually went extinct because it was too enormous. This has led some people to speculate that giant humans could have also gone extinct for the same reason. According to Live Science, we don't actually know all that much about the Gigantopithecus, other than that it weighed around 600 pounds, stood 10 feet tall, and went extinct because they had a limited diet and couldn't get enough food. We also know that these ancient primal giants are a very distant relative of orangutans. While this is not definitive proof that giants once walked the world, it also kind of is. You see, this enormous primate lived exclusively in the forest until its habitat began to shrink around 100,000 years ago. As a result, it no longer was able to find enough food to survive and reproduce, and it eventually went extinct. The first time the Gigantopithecus became known was in 1935 when a German paleontologist found its molars in a pharmacy in China where they were being labeled and sold as dragon teeth. Because as we all know, dragon teeth are the only way to fix your personal health problems. But anyway, thanks to the teeth, scientists have learned a lot about the ancient giant primate. But there have actually been no skulls or skeletons found of the Gigantopithecus, only teeth and pieces of jaw bones, which means other giant man-beasts could have roamed the earth, we just have not found their bones. Roman giant. Just recently in Rome, a new giant was found. Even by today's standards, considering we are quite a bit taller than our ancient ancestors, 6 feet 8 inches tall is a pretty incredible feat. Even some of the tallest basketball players are not that tall. And in Rome during the 3rd century AD, average men only reached about 5'6", which makes average men today look basically like giants. The fact that a skeleton has been found from Roman times with a striking height of 6 feet 8 inches is simply incredible. According to a report from the Daily Mail, archaeologists believe that they have discovered the first complete skeleton of an ancient person who had gigantism. This happened near the city of Rome while excavating a necropolis. Gigantism is very rare. It's rare these days, only affecting about 3 out of every million people. To find a skeleton with gigantism from ancient times is basically unheard of. There have been 2 partial skeletons discovered throughout the years that could have had gigantism, one in Egypt and one in Poland. However, scientists believe the skeleton they found in Rome is a definitive case of gigantism and cannot be anything else. But who's to say gigantism isn't just a lost trait passed down from our ancient giant ancestors? As you may know, gigantism is a condition that leads to excessive growth way beyond the human average. This happens because of an overproduction of growth hormones in childhood. Just think about that for a second. If it's possible for human beings to produce so many growth hormones and grow to be giants, who's to say we weren't giants before? The giants of Death Valley. According to ancient legends, Death Valley in California is actually concealing an ancient subterranean city of giants. Most of us are probably familiar with Death Valley. It is the most inhospitable place on Earth with an average temperature of over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. There's basically no water, vegetation is not in abundance, and the whole area is dangerously below sea level. But if the Native American legends are to be believed, there is an underground kingdom located underneath the desert sands. Even though the area around Death Valley truly is horrendous, it has not stopped Native Americans from living there for centuries, long before the white man showed up. And they actually have legends that say Death Valley is a land of ghosts, and that inside the subterranean city is a portal to the underworld. They have all kinds of legends about Death Valley, but most archaeologists won't even go to check the place out. It's simply never been dug up before. There are some strange tales of prospectors and miners from the early 20th century stumbling upon underground passages and finding the mummies of giants and huge statues, but none of it has ever been substantiated. There could be proof of life and giants under the cracked salt plains of Death Valley, but also there might be nothing. Ethiopian Giants. Archaeologists in Ethiopia uncovered an ancient city just recently in 2017. In a report from the BBC, archaeologists claim that they have discovered a city in eastern Ethiopia filled with artifacts from Egypt, India, and China. The city's name is Harla, and the artifacts found are proof that the old Abyssinian Empire was indeed a serious center for trade in the ancient world all the way into the 10th century. But forget about what the archaeologists found for just a minute. There is actually a local myth that says that the area was once occupied by giants. The locals claim that because the settlement buildings were constructed with stone blocks that were so large and so heavy that no ordinary people could have lifted them, it was undoubtedly giants who had occupied the place. And even though the stuffy scientists have disproved the local myth of giants, claiming it to be impossible, the local people still believe it. And why not? The oldest hominin fossil ever discovered was just north of this region. The Queen of Sheba lived close by. The Ark of the Covenant is still sitting in a compound just up the street in Oxum. Why couldn't there have been giants living in Ethiopia thousands of years ago? Robert Wadlow. If we're going to be talking about giants, Robert Wadlow must be added to the list. You probably recognize Robert as the tallest man in medical history. He is the irrefutable giant that lived. He was actually born at 6:30 in the morning in Illinois on the 22nd of February 1918. When he was last measured on June 27, 1940, Robert was 8 feet 11 inches tall. He was literally 1 inch away from being 9 feet. That's a pretty good size for a giant if you ask me. Is this proof of giants existing? Well, maybe not and maybe yes. The simple fact that a human man can grow to be about 9 feet tall says a lot about our DNA and our own potential. Of course, Robert actually had a pretty difficult life. He died in a hotel room as a result of a septic blister on his right ankle. He weighed just about 440 pounds at the time of his death, and according to Guinness World Records, Robert ate about 8,000 calories per day. That's over 3 times the recommended serving for an average adult. Being around 3 feet taller than everyone else around you could not have been a lot of fun. Imagine how many "how's the weather up there" jokes you would have to put up with. Since Robert, there has not been another person born who even comes close to breaking his record. He is certainly an anomaly, but this is definitive proof that giants can exist and have existed. Perhaps not in large numbers, but they have definitely walked across the planet. Giant footprints. Speaking of walking across the planet, there is supposedly a giant footprint in the Pingyan village of Guizhou province in China. It was allegedly discovered in 2016, and taking a good look at it, the photos you can see, it's definitely the footprint of a very large human. By local reports, the footprint found pressed into the stone was around 22 inches long. That is significantly longer than any normal person's foot. The only issue with this story is that there is not a whole lot of authentication. Sure, there are some photos of a giant footprint, and there were some vague reports that the footprint was dated back to the prehistoric era, but unfortunately, this just cannot be verified. There is no reputable source, and there are no reputable pictures. And this brings us to the second giant footprint you may have seen online. This one was found somewhere in Africa and is claimed to be 200 million years old. The footprint is also roughly the size of a human man, but the weird thing about this one is that it's the wrong side up. The giant would have had to kick the footprint sideways into the stone. Then nobody found it for thousands and thousands of years. Unfortunately, these giant footprints aren't much evidence of anything except conspiracy theories. The Nephilim. Most of you out there have probably heard of the Nephilim. They were a strange group of giant people, also sometimes known as the sons of God and the daughters of men, who supposedly lived before the Great Flood. They are supposed to be the result of the fallen sons of God reproducing with the daughters of Adam. The Nephilim are referred to in several religious texts, including Genesis and Ezekiel. In Hebrew, the word Nephilim is sometimes translated directly as giants, but despite the Nephilim appearing in so many religious texts, many scholars are unsure the exact nature of the supposed giants and whether or not they were indeed real. The issue with religious texts is that everything is up for interpretation, and trying to pinpoint the accuracy of a legend after several thousand years is a disastrous game of phone tag. Some believe the great size of the Nephilim was metaphorical, and other people take it more literally. But the main point is that the Bible spoke of giants living on Earth. Now, is that proof? Well, that's for you to decide. The Lost City of Giants. Just a few years ago, there was an incredible discovery made deep in the Ecuadorian jungle. Researchers discovered the remains of a massive structure that is now being called the Lost City of Giants. This enormous place was found in a region where local legends claim a race of giant humans once lived. It's pretty incredible, as the old structure that was found has 260-foot walls and doorways that suggest the existence of extremely tall people. There were allegedly also giant tools found in the vicinity that looked way too big to be used by normal people. A researcher based in Ecuador actually believes that the structure belonged to an unknown culture that lived in the area before the Inca. This could very well have been a city, or at least a place of worship dominated by giants of the jungle. However, because of its precarious location very far from the nearest town through dense and mountainous jungle, almost nobody is willing to explore it. And for this reason, there has not been enough research done since the recent discovery. It's one of those mysteries that is still up in the air, and we might not know the truth of the Lost City of Giants until a legitimate team of researchers gets down there and starts digging around. The giants of the Amazon. Here is another story shrouded in mystery, also from Ecuador. As reported in Archaeology World, a British research team uncovered extremely tall skeletons in the Amazon region of both Ecuador and Peru. Roughly half a dozen human skeletons were found from the early 1400s that were between 7 feet and 8 feet in height. This would make them very close to being real-life giants. According to one of the researchers, they are still looking into the exact origins of the skeletons and didn't want to make any claims based on speculation. Because the skeletons are so enormous, they could have some serious implications on life in the jungle hundreds and hundreds of years ago. As you can imagine, this is a pretty controversial area of research. No modern scientist wants to admit that giants could have been living in the jungle 600 years ago. And in this case, we might just have to wait a little longer for research to be completed. But what is a little startling about these skeletons is that their joints all appeared completely healthy. Researchers also claimed that one of the skeletons they found was a female who was about 60 years old when she died. This would make her much older than most people who have a case of gigantism, which suggests these ancient 8-foot-tall peoples didn't have a disease at all and were just naturally giant. The Kentucky Dover Mound. Last on the list for today is the Kentucky Dover Mound. It all started in the 1800s when reports began to come in that a discovery had been made of extremely large skeletons all buried under mounds of dirt in North America. The skeletons were supposedly between 7 and 8 feet tall, very much like the skeletons discovered recently in Ecuador. There were even a few skeletons discovered that were between 9 and 11 feet, having extremely large skulls and enormous lower jaw bones. These skeletons are believed to have belonged to the Adena people, who could have been an extremely rare and unique form of human living in West Virginia. Apparently, some of the skeletons found in the Kentucky Dover Mounds also had elongated skulls that were greatly deformed. If all the reports and research from the 1800s and early 1900s is to be believed, there was definitely a race of giant people living in North America way before Europeans arrived. The biggest question is, why is this not talked about more, and why is any information on the subject so hard to find? Why is this research being discreetly buried, and why do modern scientists refuse to talk about the legitimate truth of our giant ancestors? Then again, maybe the skeletons found at the Kentucky Dover Mound weren't that big to begin with, and we have been lied to. The truth may be more confusing than we know, but if giants did truly exist, it looks like they existed from North America and down into the jungles of the Amazon. And this begs another question: why did giants exist in the Americas and not in Europe or in Asia? Do you believe that giants walked the earth? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for watching. If you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe. See you again soon for another great video.